Welcome to the Avive podcast. I'm your host. My name is JF Benoit. I'm the best-selling author of Addicted to the Monkey Mind and Avive, an adventure in belonging. After 12 years of running a holistic addiction treatment center and decades of helping people who have been challenged with conflicts in their relationships, anxiety, depression, and even addiction, what I saw is that the common denominator of our pain and suffering is based on the lack of true connection with ourselves and with other people. Connection underscores absolutely everything in our lives. Whenever we're experiencing distress, when we're being reactive or experiencing triggers, the root cause is often a disconnection and a break in our ability to experience true belonging. So I bring a wealth of experience and empathy, creating a space where you could feel understood and less alone in your struggles. In this podcast, I want to help you tackle the belief that you need to change yourself in order to fit in. A belief that most of us have adopted in our upbringing that keeps creating a tremendous amount of anxiety in our lives. I want to inspire you and guide you to really shed that mindset. So welcome. I'm glad that you're here. So with connections with guests like you and interviews, I'm going to help you truly and support you to be your true self, to be able to let go of performing, let go of meeting other people's expectation, and most importantly, really gain the ability to shed all the self-judgments that we have about ourselves. And instead, really focusing on the resilient person that you are, on the courageous person that you are, and building this ability to experience yourself as this innate love and value that exists within you. So I'm really glad that you're here. Let's explore this together in another episode of Avive.
So today I wanted to talk about, I see a lot of people that are kind of reenacting and projecting their past traumas into their current relationships. And I kind of wanted to go deeper into that. And I do have an example. I have a couple of things that are, I think, fairly common that I wanted to go through. And the first one is like somebody who has like maybe an inability to forgive. So they were in a previous relationship and they find it that had kind of a bad track record. The person really never did what they said that they were going to do. They weren't reliable. And so now in their current relationship, they find it hard to kind of forgive their current partner. It's like every little thing they hold in onto, even like small mistakes. So like say, I'll call them David and Emily. So David is like late for work and he's like, sorry. Yeah. I mean, late for dinner. Sorry. I got caught up at work. And Emily's like, well, you always have an excuse. Last month you didn't even come home. And, and so he said, I've apologized and can't we just move forward? I'm going to do things differently, that kind of thing. And she said, well, it never changes. So he feels like every tiny little thing is going to become a big thing. Even when he is trying to be responsible and telling her that this is happening and she's holding on to it. So that is one scenario that I've kind of thought about. Do you have
Ouch.
thoughts on that?
I mean, this is such a cliche scenario. Like I can feel the pain, right, of this dynamic that couples are stuck into.
And it's hard because for her, it's just like a reaction and out of from her past. So she's used to handling it. And then she's just waiting for the other shoe to drop because in the past, that's what has happened. So she's not really trusting that this is going to be different, even though it is different, but it's like she can't get beyond what has happened in the past to her. And I find like I see a lot of people that get stuck in that dynamic of bringing that past into the present. And that's a hard one because we all have our triggers and we all have our traumas.
Right. And it's extremely painful because there's no win here, right? For either of them, right? David and Emily in this example, there's just no
Yeah.
win. One presents the situation of you're not accountable. You didn't show up for dinner like you said you would. And
Yeah.
the other says, well, I'm trying my best, right? And it's like this sort of battle that goes on, and it's very painful for each partner, right? It's like it creates a lot of tension, it creates a lot of separation. So I
Hmm.
think it's important to look at what is actually happening in each person's world, right? So when we say trauma, right, meaning that we are predisposed to operate from a particular set of beliefs that we already have. And
Hmm.
so both Emily in that example and David are probably not conscious that that's what they're doing. They're already have a narrative in their mind, right?
Yeah.
So let's flesh out what those narratives are, right? So for Emily, she's thinking probably something like it'll never change,
Yeah. And
right?
she's just waiting for it to get worse and worse and worse, because even though he called and said he was going to be late, then he's still late. So that's like, I'm not important enough for him to show up on time.
Oh, wow. Now you just nail like the deeper issue, right? That's underneath that,
Yeah.
which is the very thing that is getting ignored on all levels. Like Emily's probably not even paying attention to that wound that's there, is that
Yeah.
that's really what she's feeling, is that I don't matter in this scenario. If I was important, he would show up, right, for the dinner when he said he would.
Yeah, but he's feeling like, okay, I have to work. You're an adult. Like, if I show up 10 minutes late for dinner because something happened at work, why is that my issue? Like, why are you so honed in on what I am doing that
Right.
this matters to you? Like, I love you. I come home. I'm going to be there. So why is this such an issue?
And and in his mind, he's thinking, "Hey, I'm doing everything I can to provide for our family or whatever, right? Whatever the
Yeah.
logic is." And it's just like, so here's what happened though. He's perfectly fine, right? Until he shows up. And then she says,
Hmm.
"Hey, you're not accountable." Now, at that point, what does he go into? What's the narrative that gets activated in him?
Well, he's already probably stressed because he's coming home from work, and then he gets home and he's wanting to relax, because that's like, home is the relaxing safety, supposed to be a kind of an environment. And then he comes home, and instead of, hey, honey, great, you're home, it's like, what the hell? You were 10 minutes late. So, so for him, it's just like, kind of an assault in some ways, of like, I wasn't expecting this. Like, I was coming home and I wanted to enjoy an evening, and then she's like thinking she doesn't matter. She's sitting there and like, he's not showing up. He didn't think it was important enough to be here. I took all this time and I cooked this meal, and it takes a lot of effort, and I think it tastes good, and he's not even here. So yeah, I see it from both sides,
Yeah.
the
And
different.
it's very painful. So for him, you see, the belief is the moment that she says you weren't accountable, he
Mhm.
then runs with a belief of a narrative that says, I'm bad. Or, you see, I'm not enough. I'm not doing enough. Right.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
we look at these two narratives are actually projecting on the other person, right? The
Mhm.
very thing that we are terrified. So, for example, she's projecting onto him, I don't matter. And
Mhm.
he's projecting onto her, I'm bad. So,
Yeah.
meaning that they are representative of that trauma.
Mhm.
And most couples don't know how to unhook from that distorted view of what we think is happening, because we are so attached to our wounds, meaning that our wounds have been really predominant in our lives. They've happened over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then we have a tendency to look at everything through the lens of like, well, that must be what's happening,
Well,
right?
it's a
That
protective mode, because you learn how to adapt to that when it's happening to you.
right.
So when you get out of that situation, you still have that protection mode. And so it can still get activated, but you might not need it in the same way, but that's hard. That's hard to see that. Like, you don't realize that you don't need it in the same way sometimes.
Well, and here's the thing that's getting ignored in all of this is actually the pain itself.
Hmm.
So the pain is, no one is stopping. So if you think about trauma gets reinforced because it never gets attended to, right? So for her, she's feeling like she doesn't matter, but what does that feeling feel like? Right? It's a scary,
Sad.
devastating, sad. It's really
Yeah.
sad. It hurts, right?
Yeah.
So in our trauma, for most of us, what's happened is that no one taught us or no one attended or attuned to what we were experiencing. It
Hmm.
was just like, yeah, that's it. That's what's happening. And it's just like, now move on, right? With your life or trying to cope with it.
Yeah.
And the same is true for him. Probably he was raised with a lot of expectation, right? With a lot of, perfectionism, or even just, his parents expecting him to do X, Y, Z all the time. And so
Yeah.
now when he comes home and he's being told, right, that he wasn't accountable because he didn't honor his commitment, then he goes into this whole wound, right? About, like, you
Yeah.
see, it's kind of like, and the bizarre part about trauma is that it seems so real that it's existing in the present moment. That's what's so
Hmm.
bizarre.
Hmm.
But
Oh
in
yeah, you
reality,
feel it. You feel the tightness in your chest. You are recreating what had happened in the past, this in the same way in the present situation.
right. And the amazing part is that it seems and it appears we're like in those moments we're 100% hooked and we really believe that it is happening. Now, did the partner ever say, let's say, did ever say you're bad because you're not accountable? Did she ever say that to her partner?
No, she didn't say it, but I would say it was implied.
Well, you
I
see,
mean,
that's the trap
that's
we.
what he feels like. That's the
But that
problem,
is
is like they're both on the defense at this point.
right.
So,
And so when we're on a defensive in that way, like what you're describing here,
yeah.
is we really hold on to the belief that we believe we're in the other person's head. We
Yeah.
believe that the other person is thinking exactly that. So meaning she's thinking, I don't care about you, right? She's thinking that he believes that. But
Yeah.
there's nothing about him that's coming home and thinking, yeah, I really don't care about my partner. That's why I didn't come for dinner.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
Most cases, I mean, that does exist, that some relationships are faced with that, but I would say you'd have to really re-examine your relationship if you're with somebody who treats you like that.
Yeah.
Most of us, that's not the case, though, right? We're talking about two people who love each other, two people who want to experience connection with each other, wants to experience peacefulness, connection, love, right? All of that they deeply want. And yet, if you look at the dynamic, is that as soon as a wound gets reactivated in the moment, nothing else exists in that moment.
Yeah.
Nothing,
But when
nothing.
they're both having those triggers, like, that saying, we don't both want to go crazy at the same time. Like,
Yeah,
you both want
yeah,
or be going through. So, I mean, it's kind of like that. But if you have those, both have triggers that are kind of going on at that particular point, then you're both in that mode. So, how do you proceed forward when you are both in that mode?
yeah. And the answer is a lot simpler than most of us think because we actually use our mind way too much. So we in those moments we try to find a solution by making a statements or continuing the conversation or debating the point that we're trying to make. We're
Yeah.
trying to get our needs met through the other person, and the other person, like you're saying, because you have two people being reactive. So what is the missing ingredient? The missing ingredient is that no one is attending to the pain. And that's what and it's not what's the reason why they're not attending to the pain? Well, it's because they don't feel safe. So in those moments when we're acting out our wound, right, it's an indication of extreme feelings of insecurity. Like in those moments when we're reactive, when we're hooked all the way, we don't realize that in that moment we are having a very tender emotion in the body. And that tender emotion is like, whew, now we got to protect that. Now we got to like put up an armor.
Yeah, but so what would be attending the emotion in that scenario? Like that would be for Emily to just state, like, I'm feeling like when you don't come home on time, I feel like you're rejecting me, or maybe I'm not important enough. Is it just acknowledging the underlying feeling to it?
That's the beginning of it. The tricky part is, even as you said it, we're still so hooked by the narrative that we'll use you language.
Yeah.
Like stating a feeling by saying, I feel like you're rejecting me.
Yeah.
That's gonna most likely create even more debate because
now it's about him.
right. And that's the part, that's what I'm saying, is we don't even realize how much even our language is so, it's like it's accustomed to hold on to our position that we are not safe. And so the language even projects that and says, I can't let you in. I can't let you into this tender place. It's not gonna be safe. So I'm just gonna like hammer you for being late, because if I go and show my tender part, I'm already believing that that I don't matter because you're showing me that I don't matter because you showed up late for dinner. So now I'm already in that story that you're the one who really proved to me that I don't matter. So it's just like, well, how do you get out of that? It's just that It's all concretized. It's all like solid as cement in that moment, and it appears to be so.
Adrenaline going through your
Right.
through your system, and it's all ramped up.
And then the same is happening for him, which is he in this moment really believes that she's telling him he's bad. But she never said that, right? She's just frustrated because he didn't honor his commitment. But now he runs in with the story of like, I'm not doing enough and I should be doing more. And oh my God, they're so demanding at work. And now I come home and you're so demanding. And it's just like, right? And he's like, but inside this bad feeling, this feeling like he's not enough. Oh, that's a tender place. That's like, and so again, it's like, I'm not going to let you in on that. Like, no. So if we can begin to realize that that's what we're conditioned to do, that's what was modeled to us growing up. It's this kind of defensiveness around those tender wounds that exist in us, right? And exposing that wound seems to be death. Mm-hmm. And really, are we going to die?
I hope not.
It just feels like, but that's why we're holding on so tight to like pushing back. Yeah. So when you're asking, it's such a powerful question to ask and say, well, what do we do, right? When we're just so ingrained in this pain? Well, first of all, when we are talking about it, even right now, right? And as the listeners are getting to understand this dynamic, because I know for us, when we're just naming it, we can tell how familiar we are with this, because it exists in all relationships. I don't think that any relationship can really escape that dynamic. It just happens. Yeah. And it's because we all received wounding, so we can't escape, the wounding that we've received. But here's the thing. What if we can understand, to begin with, like the first sort of like place to go is to acknowledge that we don't feel safe. Mm-hmm. What if we can start there? And most of the time, it's easier to practice this outside of the triggered moment. So what I'm suggesting here is to start addressing the deeper wound inside of myself, not during the conflict, not during the debate, but the next day or the next morning, when I can say to my partner, maybe we have an hour where we're sitting for coffee, And I can just say, I noticed yesterday when I had this argument and you came home and I was frustrated, that one? And of course, they're going to remember.
Yes,
So
I
in
do.
that moment, right? What if we could go back and just say, I'm starting to see that I don't feel safe in those moments.
Mhm.
And so what can happen from there, right? Where does that, if you think of let's say Emily saying that to David, right? What do you think will happen next?
Well, it depends what state he's into, because even that, if you are still in some kind of reactive stage, you could be, what do you mean you don't feel safe? Like that's saying something about himself. Like I'm safe for you. Why are you, that like it's something that he's deficient in, especially if that's what he's talked about before or had past traumas on. But it also gives if he's not in that space, then it gives him the opportunity. It gives you the opportunity to talk about it and see like what you know how you. An interesting thing about this, I was thinking while you were talking, is I think we're also conditioned in any kinds of these disagreements that there has to be like a right side and a wrong side. Like that's how we file things. Like this happened. And I mean, I just had an incident the other day, which I thought was kind of funny. And we don't agree on, Rich and I don't agree on the, the thing, but I'm like, okay, well, that's okay. That this is what he's thinking. And it was something stupid about the garbage and how when you put the garbage in, like pushing it down so there's room for more garbage. He's like, "How come you don't push it down?" And I said, "Well, I do." And he goes like, "No, you don't. Like it's like high. It's like falling off the back." And I'm like, "When you come home, I'm usually cooking dinner. And when I'm cooking dinner, I have a lot of stuff to put in there, and I'm not going to push it down and have to like put my fingers on all the crap." I wait until I have a piece of plastic that I can push it down on, um, and then I do. But I do push it down, and so I at first I was like, I do push it down. So I wanted to be right because I knew I pushed it down. Just because he doesn't see me push it down doesn't mean I don't push it down. And so you're getting into this dynamic of right and wrong, like one view somehow has to come out as the victor of it, when in reality i I do push it down, but when he's home and I'm doing that particular task, I'm not pushing it down. So he's right in the way that he saw it in that moment, so anyways, I just think it's interesting because I feel like, and I thought about that later, like we're conditioned to, for some reason, thinking that there two different viewpoints can't exist and have it be okay, and
And
like
that's
every single thing has to be resolved in a certain way where everybody's like, oh yes, oh yes, you know what I mean? It's like a very right versus wrong
and that
type mentality.
and the reason of that exists on an emotional level, meaning that we are trapped in this right or wrong. You're absolutely right. Like even the example we were just talking about, if Emily goes back and say, "Hey, I didn't feel safe yesterday when we had the conflict," then
Yeah,
in that moment, he can go into right or wrong. He can think that
yeah,
he's wrong just because she says that, because he could be thinking, "Oh, so it's my fault that she doesn't feel safe."
right, right, yeah,
So the right and wrong are a indication that we don't feel safe. So if the partner says
yeah,
you didn't push the garbage,
yeah,
well, it almost seems too simple to really notice that one person is saying, "Look, if you cared about me, you'd push the garbage down." And the
yeah,
other
yeah.
person said,
Why
"Well,
do
if
I
you
have to do
care,"
it all the time?
right. And the other person said, "Well, if you'd care about me, I wouldn't have to push it down all the time."
Yeah, no, it's totally true. It's funny.
Right?
But there's so many little things in a relationship like that. Like that is just this tiny little thing, you know, but then it's something for a discussion because people had different viewpoints about it and different things related to it, that come up when it's being talked
Well,
about.
and I love what you're pointing out here. It does happen in the simplest things in our lives.
Yeah.
It happens with the toothpaste being squeezed, either by the end or the middle. It happens
Yeah.
in all these little moments.
Hmm.
So the key that I think is, I know it's a tall order initially because the conditioning is so thick, okay, that it really comes down to a safety issue to begin with. And I'm talking about emotional safety,
Yeah.
okay? And the trap, okay, at the beginning is that most couple, if when you begin this journey, I see that with clients all the time, where one partner will say, well, he doesn't do it or she doesn't do it, or why should I be the first? Right? Why should I be the first to expose my underbelly? Why should I be attempting to trusting when it's not happening, right? It's not happening on the other end. And
Yeah.
that's the first trap where there's no way out when we believe that,
That's
right?
still part of the win or lose mentality in a way.
Yeah,
Like
it is.
instead of just being like, what do I need to do? How do I need to resolve this in order to feel clear within myself? It's
Yes.
still setting it up as a win or lose, right or wrong, and it's really not about, I mean, it can seem like it's about that, but but it's not, I mean, it's really not.
Well, we really want to, I mean, first of all, it's a lot easier to believe the problem is about the other person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because then that just means there's no
Me?
work for
What?
me. There's no work for me. You should be changing, and if you do, everything will be fine. Just stop
Yeah.
telling me to push the garbage down.
It'd be much easier if you change and I don't have to do anything.
Uh, it's
Uh,
it's it's beautiful how, in a way, how attached we are to protecting ourselves. It's just that the way we go about it does
yeah.
not create connection with ourselves and with the other person. At some point, we have to come to face with that, right? We have to, grab the bull by the horn and say, wait a second, like I'm part of this dynamic. I'm creating this dynamic and
Yeah.
I don't feel safe.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of goes with like the second one that I wanted to bring up, which is, and I see a lot of people with this one, is just trust issues. Um, Women who, and it's not necessarily just women, women who've been cheated on, who have had somebody that really wasn't honest about certain things or were hiding, these little things, and then they get into a new relationship and they're constantly on alert for
Mhm.
looking for any signs that that's going to happen. And so that is another one. I guess that's a safety issue for sure on that one too.
Yeah. Well, and the risk is that if if I trust, so behind every attempt to expose our underbelly or tell the truth about what we're really feeling is that we're going to be rejected.
Hmm.
That's just the bottom line. So in all of our disposition, we're just trying to avoid that very truth that we have no control over, is that the other person might reject us, right?
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
the scenario that you brought up is that if I've been cheated on before and now let's say my partner says I'm going out with some buddies at work, right?
Yeah.
And I'm here at home thinking, okay, well, he's probably cheating on me. That's a defensive mechanism, right? That's like,
Yeah.
okay. So if if I don't anticipate, let's say I'm able in that moment, that person is able to release that belief that they're in danger somehow and their partner's going to cheat on them.
Yeah.
What is the belief that's most likely attached to letting go of that?
The belief of letting go of the trust issues.
Yeah, like let's say I don't think, I eliminate the thought out of my mind that my partner's going to cheat on me. I just
Yeah.
trust. I just go, okay, I'm going to go with the fact that, yeah, that happened to me before, but
Yeah.
now I'm just going to believe that this person is perfectly fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the danger in that?
The danger is that they could just give all of themselves that and totally be trusting, and then they're let down. They're and really, when people are cheated on, there's something in the back of their heads. They're like, why wasn't I good enough? Why was it that they felt like they had to go to someone else to get, like, what wasn't I providing um in it? So it's like this, it's just a fear that they're not going to be good enough, or they're not worthy, kind of having that. It's not
I love
accurate.
how you naturally bring us back to that underlying truth, which is the real source of the distress is somehow my sense of self-worth or lovability is what's in danger. But how does the person go about deciding if they're worthy of love is on action of others. And so
Yeah.
if another person cheats on them, does that really reflect if they're lovable or not lovable?
No, no, not at
I
all.
mean,
Yeah.
logically, when we ask that question, it just seems obvious that it makes no sense. The
Hmm.
issue is that on the nervous system level, we never come to some resolution about this. So we attempt to go outside of ourselves and control situations that we can't control, but
Hmm.
the emotional body is still in a state of distress. And so
Hmm.
we just keep acting out this distress because every attempt to control never resolved the distress. It builds the distress even more. So then we just keep going, and the distress, and then the behavior will never stop. And
Hmm.
then it kind of becomes like sort of a, okay, well, where is that going to go? Well, it's going to go into a partner who's going to start being defensive about it. And then, right? And then it's just like escalating from there. And then we
And it,
have two people again that are just acting out their wounds with each other.
well, and it still is that setup of someone's good enough or not good enough. It's still that black and white kind of thing, instead of, like, why don't we think of it, if somebody does that, like, oh, okay, well, we're not the correct match. Why does it have to be about you, what the other you know what I mean? Like, that's still a setup in our brains that we're thinking that what they're saying or doing is a reflection on us, instead of just like, oh, okay, well, we have two, this is not going to work, or whichever way. Like, why is it taken so personally?
It's so hard that, to even begin to be able to do what you're saying here, to be able to just
Yeah.
see, well, yeah, this shouldn't really mean anything about me. That's not how we decide if I'm
No.
lovable or not, right?
Yeah, it
But
doesn't feel like that. If something like that happens, it feels awful. But from a, just from pulling back perspective, I've I've known a lot of people that were cheated on, and they are wonderful people. That there was, like, no reason, like, it said nothing about them. You know.
Well, the key here is that again, what we have not been taught to do is that the pain was there before the person cheated on them. The
Yeah.
pain was there before the partner canceled on the dinner. The pain is there. It's in the body.
Yeah.
And we have to come to an understanding of that truth. The pain of the emotional body exists. And so we have to be brave enough to begin to build that relationship with our own wounding instead of acting it out in the relationship.
Yeah.
And this is the very thing that very few people, right, even mention that to us, even say,
Yeah.
okay, here's the thing. It appears that you're sold on the idea that your partner is causing this pain that you're experiencing. But in reality, the pain has always been there. It's been there from your conditioning. And so now what the approach can become is, oh, instead of focusing on my partner, now I'm going to switch the focus on my ability to create safety with my pain and
Mhm.
my ability to verify if those messages I'm sending to myself right? That this is how we define me. This is how is that situation means that I don't matter because my husband didn't show up for dinner or
Yeah.
I've been cheating on, right? So
Yeah.
there's a pain there.
Yeah.
Now, here's the beauty about the pain is that the pain is also blinding us from seeing who we truly are. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're raised with a parent that said, if you don't meet these standards in our household, then you're just not good enough. Let's say that's the message you got, right? So
Yeah.
you apply yourself at everything you do. You apply yourself at school, you apply yourself at cleaning the house. And let's say you just become this ideal kid and your parents give you the praises and say, see. Okay. Oh, great. I'm a great person, right? So then you move on to life. And so your life is lived attempting to always meet the standards, right? Always above and all of this stuff. And then at some point, somebody is disappointed in you.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes is that
Yeah.
moment. So why is that? Why? I mean, people know this. The cliche thing is that you can have 20 people tell you that you did great, and one person tells you a criticism, and all you remember is that criticism, right? So
Yeah.
that's a result of conditioning. So this
Yeah.
person in that moment, when they're being criticized, what's being reactivated is the
Mhm.
fact that they believe that their own sense of worth, their own
Yeah.
sense of lovability is based on a performance.
Yeah.
So if somebody questions the performance, it's not just the performance that they're questioning.
Yeah.
They're actually believing that what's been put in question is who am I in terms of being lovable and worthy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I kinda had that yesterday. Like, I have to work with that because if I noticed because I did have a parent like that I had to, like, um, you had to perform in a certain way, otherwise there was gonna be a lot of, shit because of it. So, basically, yesterday, I had the same thing happen, like, I'm doing, my, work for a client, and, there was something that came up for him that he needed, like, it wasn't really anything to do with me, but he was asking me to help resolve it. So, um, I went to resolve it, and in the end, he wanted me to be able to talk on the phone to them instead of emails, but they weren't answering the phone, so I left my email, and they answered via email. So he was disappointed that I wasn't able to talk with the person, and then I felt like I just had this feeling like, "Oh, no, I'm not doing it, right." I'm like, I tried, but I just, like, couldn't get them on the phone, and then, it just I had that come up again because that has come up in the past, like, if I feel like um I really wanna do, like, a really good job with something, and if I failed, like, getting every exact thing right, then I'm like, "What the hell? I didn't get that right," you know? And so I had the same thing. I kinda felt, like, kinda sad, and then I was like, "Okay, like, do I really
So
think that he was saying that my whole job was bad because of that one instance?" And no, he doesn't. He didn't say it in a bad way. I was taking it in a very personal way, like, oh, because I knew he was disappointed. So he did have disappointed in it, and I hated that I just had disappointed him. So yeah, I had that come up, and then, I just kind of sat with it, and I was like, okay, well, do I really think that he's saying I'm just doing a crappy job because of this one thing wasn't handled correctly, but there've been hundreds of things that have been. And
mhm,
so logically it didn't make sense, but emotionally it did for
right,
me, like
right.
feeling that.
Well, yeah. And I love how simple that example is, but so
Yeah,
true, which
yeah,
is so the antidote, right, to creating safety and to actually move beyond those reactive and
yeah,
keep reactivating those wounds is that in that moment, that pain is asking your attention.
yeah,
So
mhm,
it doesn't need to be rationalized with. It doesn't need to be told anything. There's not even a why question. It's like, oh, this really hurts. And
Yeah.
now when we are able to actually go into that tender belly place that I was talking about,
Yeah.
this place is where we can meet ourselves, meaning that in that moment, it's not so much about him. It's
No.
about a pain that already exists inside of Carrie that
Yeah.
has a lifetime of living with a dad who kept
Yeah.
saying, right, you're
Yeah.
lovable. If the message
Yeah.
that kept being sent is if you perform, but
Yeah.
if it appears that you're not performing. And so
Yeah.
that's the pain that we're touching in that moment,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
talking about a lifetime of pain
Mhm.
that most of us have not learned to attend to, and no one has taught us that we can attend to, that we can make room for that, and that
Yeah.
it's not something to think about. It's just something to honor and bless and
Yeah.
go, oh, like, let me hang out in this for a few minutes. Let me.
Yeah, and to actually feel, because when you're more in the situation and you're in that like reactive kind of stage, and you're taught like through what is happening to suppress those feelings and to kind of like just ignore them, because you keep having those and there's no way to resolve it. Doesn't feel as if there's any way to resolve it while you're in that situation, but then when you're out of that situation, I really appreciated that I felt it pretty darn strongly. So it wasn't like I could be like ignore it. I didn't want to ignore it. I just felt it and I'm like, "Oh, I'm really feeling this right now." And was able to just kind of take it from that point. But um it can take it has taken a while till I even recognized, getting out of that situation where I even recognized I was having that feeling,
Well,
like,
and what's really painful for most of us is that we also have a belief that the emotions that we're having are not acceptable. So
right.
first of all, right, we're triggered by the experience. We are reactivating this wounding of perfectionism, or this is how if you perform, you get love. But then we're having this bad feeling, and then there's like a battle with that feeling. Like I shouldn't have that feeling,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Let's
now we're
positive affirmation our way out of this. Come on.
yeah. Oh gosh, that's harsh. I always say, positive affirmation is lying to myself until I believe it's true. It's like, right? It's like forcing myself because
Yeah.
the being is asking for the very thing that it's been craving all of our lives is to be seen, to be heard, to be felt. And it's the magic of the intelligence that exists in our emotional body is incredible. I now can recognize very rapidly.
Yeah.
I noticed like even this morning, we were in a hurry to go somewhere, and my partner just makes a comment about how we're late or whatever. And then I could feel my nervous system going into, see, you're not enough, you're not doing it right, or you made a mistake because now you're not supporting us to leave on time and all of that. And in that moment, I just sat with it. I sat with that pain, and it's just like, it's it just hurts, and there's no need to have any reason for it. It just hurts. And then as I kept tuning into the pain, and we got in the car and we're driving, and I just looked at her and I said, it's really strange, but in that moment, I noticed that I really missed the connection. Like I felt like somehow that I wasn't okay. I was running with all that, but what I was really missing is the fact that the priority became being late, not our connection, not being with each other, not
Yeah.
feeling each other and you see this is the kind of relationship that is possible when we actually make room for the emotion, but then communicate with the partner that what we really want is not to keep reactivating the wound, but that we felt the wound and then we come back to the partner and said, I felt my wound and now I'm noticing that I missed you because we prioritize being late. And then my partner was able to say, oh, I'm sorry. I realized I was being really reactive in that moment. Like, you're right. And it's like, there's no blame in it. It's like a beautiful interaction. So we have to learn that in relationship, Our wounding is our responsibility. And it's something that we have to learn to feel safe with. We have to learn to build a relationship with those trigger moments and be courageous. I really believe that the most powerful tool that we can, that is within our ability is courage. Courage to say, I'm scared. Courage to say, I don't feel safe right now.
Courage to be authentic.
Yeah. Courage to say, oh, I'm noticing you're coming from work late and you missed our dinner. And boy, I'm hurting. I'm hurting right now. Now notice, there's no blame in that. There's no story in that. There's no defensiveness in that. And if you follow the hurt, what you'll end up saying to your partner is, oh, I was really looking forward to this. I really wanted connection with you. Like, that's really what I wanted. And it's like, boy, it just hurts. And our partner can meet us there. I mean, you might have a partner being defensive for a minute, but if you stay with it and you don't engage in that kind of, like this debate that we've illustrated earlier, you stay connected to this emotion and it'll bring us back into connection, right? It appears in a way impossible for so many of us just because we've just never been, we've never learned it. Nobody's modeled this for us, right? So that's why it appears impossible. But I really see that it's not at all impossible. It's actually something that we can do naturally if we decide that we can have courage and tell the truth about how we really feel, the underbelly, without blame. It's so relieving for both parties,
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Avive Levy podcast. Click on the link in the description below to record one of the questions you may have that we'll answer on one of our future podcasts. Also, I'd like to invite you to be a guest so that we can support you in delving deeper in resolving some of the core issues that you might be dealing with. Don't forget to check out my link for my books, also our newsletter, online groups, and the weekend adventures that I offer. Again, it is extremely rewarding to be on this self-discovery journey with you and to actually get to experience a sense of true belonging.